Alright, hello once again. Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD, or Application and Website Development Program, I have been creating a series of video presentations based on the book being used for the AWD 1111.NET Framework with Web Databases class for the fall 2019 semester. The book, as you can see on screen here, is Pro ASP.NET MVC 5, an A-Press text by Adam Freeman. I'm working my way through Chapter 25 of 27. And we're on the middle of page 726, talking about deriving from the built-in validation attributes. So, as the author mentions, in the previous example, we built the validation attribute from scratch. But we can also derive new classes from built-in attributes, which allows or gives you the ability to extend, again, making this extensible, right? In listing 2515, you can see the contents of a new class called Future Date Attribute that we've added to the infrastructure folder. Alright, so what do we have here? Well, what we're saying here, we put in a valid value, and the value we put in is greater than the current value. Now, one thing I thought about with this is, since it has to be greater, it looks like you cannot book an appointment for the day you're on. Now, in a way that makes sense, because if it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I shouldn't be able to book an appointment for noon on that day. But looking at it the other way, what if it's noon and I want to book an appointment for 4 o'clock and they have one? All right. One thing I want to mention about this too is, as you're looking through this stuff, is this overkill? All right. So what you're doing is you're adding a new class to put this in so that you're going to be able to put in this future date attribute, and you're going to be able to put that eventually. My guess is that we're going to put that in here. All right. Well, I mean, life is a trade-off, right? In other words, if this is the kind of thing that we're going to be able to use on a regular basis, it's probably a good idea to include it. If it's a one-time shot, should you put it in there? It's still not a bad thing to do. Now, the author says here that he has derived the new future date attribute from the required attribute. So this is inheriting from this. All right. So again, we've done that. Now we're going to have to come in here and we're going to have to add this. Or did we want the required in there still? Let's see what the author has asked for. All right. Probably, I would guess, I think at least, that this is going to end up handling it anyway. Sometimes, and I've seen this before, what will happen is, when you start doing this, the first thing people will do is, if they've got 4 fields like this, or 3 fields, or whatever it is, they'll just put required, required, required. Well, that's a start. Then you know you have to have values in there. But typically, you're going to want to put in more than just that. All right? All right. Creating a model validation attribute halfway down here on page 727. The custom validation attributes we have created thus far are applied to individual model properties. This means they are only able to raise property level validation errors. We can use attributes to validate the entire model as well. which, as the author says, allows him to raise model level errors. So now we've created a No Joe on Mondays attribute .cs class file in infrastructure. All right, again, please be cognizant of the fact that the author, some of the examples that the author puts in here are a little bit convoluted. I don't want to do. Why I keep doing that? And I have never met this gentleman. Okay, so if you said to me, why is he doing what he does? I don't know. However, all right, it may be that this is his kind of different sense of humor. Who knows? All right, so the code here takes up the remainder of page 727. All right, so I'll tell you what, let's keep the code up here. All right, so the author says, when we apply a validation attribute to the model class as opposed to a single property, the object parameter that the model binder will pass to the isValid property will be the model object, in this case, an appointment object. The validation attribute checks to be sure that we really do have an appointment object, and if so, that we have values for the client name and date properties that we can work with, okay? If we have that necessary data, then we have to make sure that Joe isn't trying to book on a Monday. So now what we can do is we can go back to our appointment.cs file, our model, all right? And before we've even got class appointment up here, we can say no Joe on Mondays. And you can see the IntelliSense has picked it up. All right. So at this point, we're performing the same kinds of validations as in the action method. And the validation attributes, which mean the user will see two similar messages. We wouldn't want that. So to resolve this, we remove the explicit validation checks in our make booking action in our home controller. All right, this has the effect of making the validation attributes solely responsible for performing those checks. So I'm on the bottom of page 728 in the book. We've got to go back to our home controller here, and we want to come in here and let's just grab the entire appointment dot. Well, we've got that. We put that in already. All right, so for our home controller, let's change it, and we'll fill it up with this. Again, we're going to get an error when we first do this because some of the code is on the next page. All right, fixed. All right, so the key difference is what we have on the screen that you can see right here on screen. And the author says an important point to note is that model level validation attributes will not be used when a property level problem is detected. To see how this works, and let's do it. So let's do a save all, start the application, and we want to navigate over to our home, make booking, URL. Enter Joe as the name. And we want here, according to the author, 10, 5, 2020. All right. And leave the checkbox unchecked. When we go here, okay, must be a Monday. So the only error that we see is the warning about the checkbox. So we don't see that Joe cannot book on Mondays. So, but when I check here, now notice we do get it. All right. The problem from the user's perspective is that we have implicitly assigned the name and data values by not flagging up errors for them in the first panel. It might seem minor, but if Joe books his appointments a year in advance and does something, if it's at all possible, all right, that he puts the first thing in here, you might just think, oh, okay, that's a Monday or whatever. Okay. All right, defining self-validating methods, 729 and 730. Again, I'd like to finish this regardless of what my time is right now, because that'll allow me to start up a new section. So I should be okay on this. All right, so again, I'm on page 729, right near the bottom of the page. Another validation technique is to create self-validating models, where the model logic is part of the model class. A self-validating model implements the iValidate object interface as shown in listing 2520. Well, we're going to add this, but it looks like the first thing we need is to be able to put that using statement in our appointment.cs file. So why don't we just put it in there right now? All right, so now we've got that. And then we're making major changes. All right, so I think I'm probably best off just taking the whole namespace that we've got right here, highlighting all of it, and changing it to what is shown here. All right. Now, the author mentions here on the bottom of page 730, the iValidate object interface defines one method. That method is called validate. All right. This method takes a validation context parameter, although this type isn't MVC specific and it's not of much use to us. The result of the validate method is an enumeration of validation result objects, each of which represents a validation error. If the model class implements the iValidate object interface, then the validate method will be called after the model binder has assigned values to each of the model properties. The benefit to this approach is that it combines the flexibility of putting validation logic in the action method with the consistency of being applied anytime the model binding process creates an instance of the model type. And basically, we've got the model and property level validation combined in one place. All right. So let's do a file save. Let's run it again. go into our make booking, home make booking, and we're going to put in Joe, and we're going to put in 10-5. And we will leave the except, and now notice we have both our errors are in the same place. All right, so that's it for this part of the lesson. I'm going to come back and talk in just a moment on performing client-side validation. So I'll be back with that presentation shortly.